Hi there, I'm Jim, the owner of PureWave Audio and the Studio Edge Pro audio recording series with 40 years of commercial sound engineering and mastering experience, plus a bachelor's in electrical engineering, which allows me to sift between fact and fiction. I am dedicated to empowering professional and inspiring recording engineers. Stay tuned and let me guide you through the exciting world of pro audio recording. Today, we are discussing my personal journey through the history of recording gear from cassette 4-track to full digital commercial studio and all the steps in between. I thought today would be fun to talk about the history of recording gear since it directly lines up with me personally coming of age into this field. What I mean by this is that right when I was getting into recording, it was the first time in history that you could buy a professional studio recording device that was not the size of a washing machine, like a 24-channel Studer tape deck. Back when I was 13, 14 years old, I was in my first band as a drummer, and one day I was told that my guitarist's guitar teacher had a recording device at his home. After years of just stereo recordings on an Akai cassette deck that was part of my Akai hi-fi system, I was thrilled to know there might be some real recording gear coming out for hobbyist users. So I tagged along to one of his lessons, and his teacher, Jeff Dayton, showed me the TOC Tascam 144 cassette 4-track. Now, Jeff Dayton went on to have a great career and ended up being Glenn Campbell's band leader and friend for 15 years until Glenn finally passed away. So after seeing this recorder in person, I saved up all my money and went out and bought a Tascam 244, which was just released. It was $2,600 at the time. Imagine what that is in today's money. And of course, a 4-track recorder is a free app on an iPhone now. The difference between the 144 and the 244 was the new unit had stacked pots offering parametric EQ and panning on the monitoring section above the transport. And to complement this recorder, I had to have an effects unit, and the best affordable one at the time was the Yamaha SPX 90. It had courses, delays, reverb, but no multi-effects. It was just one effect at a time, and I paid around $650. And that is what launched my recording career. I actually coined my name Illusion Studios, where sounds are created from the archives of your mind. Do you get it? Alluding back to what you created in your head and now recording? Yeah, maybe. About 4 years later, I bought the next upgrade in semi-portable recorders called the Tascam 388, which was similar layout to the 244, but with a 1/4-inch reel-to-reel deck built in with 8 tracks total. It was around $3,100. This thing started to get serious enough to go rent a reel-to-reel 2-track like a Tascam 32 when we were mixing our albums and getting ready for cassette duplication. We got into a big spaghetti mess editing tape, and I learned quick to always mix your album in order if you're not interested in splicing. A few years later, this puts us around 1990, 1991, I bought a Tascam DA30 DAT machine. Before the DAT machine, we were renting the latest in digital stereo technology called the Sony PCM F1 digital adapter. You would use this with a professional VHS recorder and record digital ones and zeros to tape. Of course, we were using consumer VHS machines at home, but you gotta do with what you got. I remember saving up and using some of my student loans to pay for my DA30. I got home, put the box in my room sealed, and it didn't get open for a week because I had finals. Then I spent a while archiving all my cassette masters to 2-channel digital over my school break. I still have all those DAT tapes now, 35 years later, with a backup archive to WAV files. Or should I say, the tapes are now a backup to my WAV files, and I also have them backed up on a NAS system and also some hard drives. Well, I guess I don't need those tapes anymore. I really want to thank you for supporting the channel. And if you're struggling in your recording endeavors, you probably need to really dig into the physics of sound, and you can learn this in detail with the Studio Edge Pro Audio Recording Series I created, specifically Volume 1, Studio Concepts, Gear, and the Physics of Sound. Now, there's no one sponsoring this video today. It is supported by those of you that have purchased my courses and purchased from purewaveaudio.com. Check out the links below in the description, and thank you for your support. Now, the 388 recorder was a 1/4-inch 8-track recorder, and they started coming out with machines like the TRS-8, which was 1/2-inch 8-track recorder. And for a while, I did have a machine to check out whether the bandwidth was better, better recording separation between the tracks, things like that. And that machine actually served me pretty well until one day it needed a repair, and I sent it back to Tascam, which is in California. Very heavy unit too. It's probably 75 pounds. And they couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. And like 2-3 months went by and they didn't have this thing fixed. And it just so happened I was getting ready to go on tour with my band across California. And so I actually showed up at the factory unannounced and just walked into the service department and was like, hey, where the hell is my machine? Like, you guys have had it for 3 months. It's supposed to be a 2-week turnaround. This is after multiple calls and emails and all that stuff and nothing actually happening. So I go walking in the back and I see my machine, and instead of like being the solid square, it was like shifted like this. And I'm like, what the hell did you guys do to it? And they're like, well, this is the way it came to us. And I'm like, well, that's not the way it was at my house. Like, it got damaged in shipping. I ended up getting a credit and, from the payout of the shipping, and worked out a deal with them to get into a DA88 new digital recorder, taking up my time for 3 months and not telling me that my machine looked like, a parallelogram or whatever instead of a square. So it really wasn't until I bought the Tascam D88 8-track digital recorder that things really started to change for me. I was getting my electrical engineering degree. Knowledge is power. I was playing out in award-winning bands. I was sharing the stage with 3 or 4 bands a night, which was great advertisement for the studio, and I was really honing in on my recording chops. The first time I fired up the DA88, which was called the DTRS machine, I had a blank formatted tape in it, and it was in play mode. And I was setting up my mixer and kind of forgot about it, and all of a sudden looked up and I was startled that the transport was engaged and timecode was rolling, and I didn't realize it. And then it hit me. There's no tape hiss and no real transport noise. And in the past, you always knew if you were engaged because the transport was going and you could hear the tape hiss. It was kind of a subconscious thing. And I just remember that being a moment in time for me. Technology has changed. So now that I had this discrete digital recorder, I needed a discrete mixer. And I ended up getting the Soundcraft Spirit console. It was a 16x8 inline mixer with high and low shelf and 2 parametric EQs. Even though I've been recording clients for years, it wasn't until '94 that I actually moved into a rented commercial recording space and started really making a name for myself. I renovated the control room, started working full-time in the industry, and reinvesting all my money into gear. And it went fast. I decided to upgrade to a 24-track system, so I bought 2 more DA88s and the remote with meter bridge on a rolling stand. But to accommodate this, I needed a 24-channel inline console. After research, I ended up getting the Soundcraft Ghost, which not only had the British EQ, but also mute automation via MIDI. I would use the sync card in the DA88 to run the timecode input into the console so I could record and play back the mute automation. It worked really well. Now at this time, Cakewalk was the main MIDI software out there. I had a computer with a MIDI interface, and this would control multiple niche 8-channel fader automation 1-rack units. And that would actually be put into your inserts of the console, and then you'd be able to automate the volume. But the problem with this is it caused a little bit of interesting patching with your patch bays, and you're taking up the inserts of your consoles. A few years later, Mackie came out with this add-on fader automation system called the Ultramix. It was brilliant, and instead of taking up all your inserts, it became its own patch bay. So you just plugged it in the inserts and all your patches were still available. And this came with a little mixer that was connected by an Ethernet cable, and honestly, it was a phenomenal system. The rest of the studio consisted of JBL 4430 mains, powered by a 1RU Crown amp, Event 2020 near fields, I just got off the NS10Ms I was using, and here's a whole video about that experience. I had a CD player, a DA30, a DA30 Mark II, a Pro Tascam 122 cassette deck, 2 Effectron delays, a MIDI Verb 2, 2 Sony HR MP5 multi-effects units, which were awesome, my SPX90 from 1984, a Proteus 1 XR sound module that had a decent orchestra string sound for the time. In the other rack, I had a DBX 1046 compressor limiter, 4 channels, Valley International Dynamic Gate, Orban 622 EQ, and a White Instruments EQ, and a unique pair of LA4As, which is kind of like LA3As, LA2As, and a few patch bays. Now, around this time is when 2-channel audio DAW systems were coming out. I was a PC guy, and I had a SpeedIF card by Digital Audio with 2-track editor called SoundForge by Sonic Foundry. I was the first in my city to be doing stuff like this, and also bought a CD burner for a whopping $2,400 that went internally in your computer, and blank CDs were $15 each. Not duplicated, but blank. I think there was also another voiceover studio that was using a Mac with a 2-channel card by a company called DigiDesign, if you remember that name. I don't think he had a CD burner though. And with the SpeedIF card, what I would do is take my DAT machine, use that as A to D, SpeedIF out, go straight into the computer, or run my DAT tapes into the computer if we were doing it that way. At some point, finally it all just went straight into the computer and I never went to DAT tape. The other interesting item I had was an old Mac filled with Lexicon Nuverb 300L reverb cards. These cards only had digital outs, so I had to use the Lucid ADA 1000 converters to bring them back into the console. The Nuverb card was specifically designed as an add-on card for the Macintosh computers utilizing the NuBus expansion slot. It essentially brought Lexicon's renowned reverb technology directly into the computer. And it was great, but as soon as Macintosh upgraded off the NuBus, these cards became obsolete, and a good time to buy. After some exponential growth, I ended up moving to a whole new facility and over 15 weeks renovated the whole place for isolation, wiring, and then slowly dialing in the acoustics because, well, I was broke. I just bought a building, and all that renovation pretty much tapped me out. So after about a year or two being in that building, around 2000, Tascam upgraded to the DA78HR, which was a replacement for the DA88, but 24 bits instead of 16. So I kept my remote and switched over. Fun fact, the DTRS machine made by Tascam was based off the data recorder for the space shuttle and could take a fall from 10 feet and keep working. Another competitor fun fact, the Alesis Blackface, the first generation of ADATs, had massive failure rates. Alesis licensed and bought the transport from JVC, I believe, and they were going to warranty their failing transports until JVC found out Alesis was running the transports at 3 times the original speed. Warranty avoided since they were not designed to do so, and hence a new ADAT model had to be designed and launched. Along with my 24-bit D-to-A78s, I also obtained the Tascam DA45HR 24-bit DAT recorder. Now this is where we start seeing the digital world take over. Mackie came out with a turnkey digital system for recording, a D8B digital mixer, and an HDR 2496 digital 24-track recorder editor, all on hard drive. The mixer had 4 banks, all your inputs, then your tape playback, then groups and MIDI, and then effects. You would just bank between them, so you had 24 faders and you just hit a button, boom, you're on the next layer, boom, you're on the next layer. They also had 4 DSP cards, almost like a UAD DSP engine that you could have reverbs, delays, even auto-tune was built into the console. It really worked well throughout. This digitally connected to the HDR recorder, and with a screen and a mouse, you're recording without tape, including DTRS or DAT. I could be recording in the WAV file format at all times, and the best part was total recall. No more leaning over the Ghost console that had 1200 knob settings to write down. File open and I'm ready to go. Need to work with 6 clients in one day? File open, file save, file close, and file open again. Flying faders, ting 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 ting. In the interim, I had a digital light pipe patch bay so I could switch between DA78s or the HDR or do full transfers in between the two. I also had a full 5.1 Event 2020 speaker system in place with sub. My first recording session with the D8B caused some major drastic issues. So the way I started was, I had the D8B set up behind and I had the Ghost in front, and everything was patched into the DA78s. Now, because I was running the Ghost, the DA78s were all analog patched. Then with the D8B, it was all digitally patched to the recorder, so I could actually have both systems simultaneously connected to the recorder at the same time. And so what I did is I did verifications. I would play back a mix, and I would listen to it on the Ghost, and then I would do it on the D8B, and I would just verify that my sound quality was equal or greater. And of course, the functionality was way greater, right, on the D8B. So this was great. This was my testing process. But I never ended up recording on the D8B, and this is what happened during my first session. I had some classical people come in with an acoustic guitar and a flute. And I had them in separate rooms, and they were doing, box, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And we started recording, and all of a sudden I just started getting glitches, like pops, ticks, all sorts of stuff. And I couldn't figure it out. And I was like, I just tested this thing for a month, had no issues. I finally switch over, and everything's just going, nuts. And it was brutal. I mean, I'm one of these guys that dots his I's, crosses his T's, always performs for people. And I just lost a day recording and disappointed my clients. I finally got on the phone with Tascam, and they were like, oh, what you need to do is get a Y connector and a 75 ohm terminator and put it on the last DA78, and all your problems will go away. And so they told me to go to Radio Shack, which existed at the time, and for like $3 in parts, I fixed my problem. And I just was dumbfounded that it was it was that simple. Why was that not in the manual? Why did they not tell you that stuff? Things like that. So of course, I've been in an analog console the whole time, so these were never issues. But once we got to the digital side of the world, you had to make sure that all your clocking technology was actually terminated correctly. And I had it set up right, but units today usually have a termination button built in to where if you are last in the chain, you could hit the termination, it would be there. So something I learned, and it was a difficult learning that cost me a whole day of recording. Now that experience was in 2001, and around 2007 is when PreSonus came out with the Fire Studio. And at this point, I was now a pro audio dealer, so I had direct connection to information from manufacturers. Moving to a mixerless system and being reliant on a computer to be recording and not crashing was, to say the least, an anxiety-provoking situation, especially after my BNC termination story I just told you. So the way I approached the switch out was to make a full 24-channel system out of the Fire Studio, but then have the Mackie system ready to go at any moment's notice as a backup. And if I didn't turn it on for 6 months straight, then we had a solid DAW system and I could get rid of the Mackie system. And that's exactly what happened. I think I was using Cicade Samplitude or Magix for CD authorizing, but maybe some multi-track stuff too, but finally went to Nuendo. Now the Fire Studios did not last long. It was just an experiment to get off the old discrete component system. I rapidly moved to the Lynx Aurora 16 and 8 system for 24 channels that were connected to two AES-16 PCIe cards in the computer. This became a robust system, and it was also the first time in my recording career that when I was testing it on an acoustic guitar, it felt like I wasn't listening to a recording and that the guitarist was virtually in front of me while listening to the speakers. Profound, to say the least. Then I started monitoring on the Focal SM8s, which was an interesting digital hybrid speaker system. And then I was on the 6 Series Twins with a Sub 6 for a long time. Throughout the years, I became really serious and got the best boutique analog front end to supplement the best A to D conversion. This included SPL's Gold Mic Make 2, Distressors, multiple Anthony DeMaria Lab 600s and 700s, the Amex CIB channel in a box, Neve 9098s, and the SPL Transient Designers. Then 10 years later, Lynx came out with the Aurora N system in 2018, which can work off of Thunderbolt, which I'm using, HD, or Dante. Basically, it was the signal-to-noise ratio of the Hilo, which was their 2-channel flagship model, but now in a multi-track converter system. Today, there could be options of going with a Dante system, where you could have a lot of A to D and D to A for a hybrid system, or you could do a merging system up to 192 kilohertz. They make DSD, but I don't need a DSD system. And keep in mind, the higher you go up in sampling rates, the more limitations you have with third-party plugins, and keeping it around 96 actually keeps you in the realm. If you need to do real-time EQ and mixing in higher bandwidths past 192 kilohertz, then you need to use a Pyramix system to accomplish this. Now, I'm currently using the Focal Trios ST6, which you can see behind me. There's really no need for a sub because the subs are built into the Trio 6, and they also have a focus mode that drops off the subs and band limits the mid-range and tweeter. If you already watched my NS10 video, then as you could guess, I never use the focus mode. And that brings us to today. I have added the SPL 8-channel gain station that goes to 300 kHz with solid state or tube choices in one box. I also have the SPL PQ mastering EQ, the SPL Iron mastering compressor, Heritage Audio wireless RAM 5000 surround monitor controller, a few Shelford channels, an Empirical Labs Mackie channel strip, and two 6176s, which are 610 preamps with 1176 compressors. I've had an amazing journey through the technology boom of pro audio recording equipment, and it has always been fun and challenging working out the next integration of studio designs as technology changes. If you have some of your journeys you want to share with people, by all means comment below. And most of the gear I use you can find at purewaveaudio.com, and for expert education on the physics of sound, gear selection, building a studio, acoustics, and everything you ever wanted to know about selecting and recording a drum kit, then check out thestudioedge.com. I hope you've enjoyed this trip through history of some of the world's best recording gear. Have a great day.